Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Joe Emilio show. Apologies for the delay. A little bit of technical issues, not a problem. We are here, and she is also here. And I'm going to get right into it, seeing as we're running a bit late. Sorry, not overtime, late. Ladies and gentlemen, the woman who wrote this amazing book. I'm still busy reading it. I didn't get a chance to finish it, but I'm almost done. I'm like 40 pages away from being done. It is a fantastic book. I highly recommend you guys to go check it out. The link to buy the book is in the description as well. So go check it out. Go buy the book. It is available right now at bookshops and Amazon and Take-A-Lot. I got mine off of Take-A-Lot. So yeah, go check it out. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome the one, the only, the fabulous, the ferocious, fearless, Helen Zille. Hello,
I
Helen.
love that introduction. Hi, Joe. Happy to be with you. That made me laugh.
Thank you so much for coming onto the show. It really does mean a lot to me. I'm honored to have you on the show. Being also someone who has fallen victim to the woke cult, as I like to call them. Yeah, this is going to be a fun conversation.
It will be a fun conversation. It's not easy being stared down by the wokerati, but it's necessary.
I'm sure there's a few of them watching now, but
Sure.
it doesn't matter. There is so let's get right into it. I think the first question I want to ask you is, the book was released on the 26th of April, if I remember correctly. Since then, how has the response been?
It's been great. It's been mixed. You know, a response to a book is always mixed. And that's when you know that you're hitting a spot, because people aren't neutral about it. I've had a lot of criticism and I've had a lot of support. And I've done my very best to engage the issues, because the issues that I raise are crucial for South Africa and are reverberating through the English-speaking world. And so, yes, people are taking the book seriously, either criticizing it or supporting it or debating it. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Fantastic. I'm glad to hear that. Have you been, I don't know, have the woke cults come out again after you? Have they given you trouble on the twats?
Well, the Twitterati have been out there and making all kinds of allegations. You see, the interesting thing is that Twitterati tend not to be able to read more than 240 characters.
Nice.
So that's the majority. I know that's a huge generalization, because I read many books, but I also tweet. But many people who will lose their marbles on Twitter will never read a book. So you can say a lot of things in a book that, if you were to say them, even summarizing them very accurately in 240 characters, people would lose everything they have in trying to cancel you. But if you ask them to read a book on the subject in which your argument is contextualized and analyzed, they'll never get beyond the first paragraph.
No, yeah. You often, when you engage, especially the trolls on Twitter, and you're like, because I've had this many times about different debates about South Africa, especially with the land issue in South Africa and stuff like that. And I say, well, here's a statistic. And then they're like, no, those stats are racist. It's like, how can stats be racist? They just shut it down. They don't want to read anything else. But yeah, that's a very common trait with them.
Well, of course, lived experience and whatever your prejudices and predilections are far more important than the evidence. And that's one of the features of wokeness, is that you can just dismiss evidence if it doesn't correlate with your lived experience, whatever that lived experience happens to be, even if it's your own prejudices.
Isn't it a bit ironic, though? Like, because the whole woke thing is about lived experience. In a way, this book is your lived experience on wokeness.
Indeed,
the irony.
That's a very good point. It is about a number of people's lived experience on wokeness and what the implications are. So, for example, I cite the case of a notorious video, some would say a famous video, that was made by some students at the University of Cape Town, which is South Africa's premier university, in which there was a serious argument that quote unquote, science must fall.
Mm.
The notion that science and the understanding of gathering empirical evidence and testing hypotheses and using control groups and then drawing out whether a hypothesis works in various situations to be able to then verify a thesis. That is a method that simply, in the woke view, reinforces white male dominance in society. And therefore, that methodology needs to be thrown out and replaced by lived experience. And in this video that was made called Science Must Fall, the notion that people could throw lightning over great distances to kill a rival was granted as much credence as Newtonian physics, because, of course, Newtonian physics was only based on the fact that Isaac Newton saw an apple fall, which was his experience, and so he invented the whole laws of motion on that basis and the idea of gravity, and that, therefore, that can be as easily dismissed as people's experience of being able to throw lightning across great distances. That is the level of debate that arises from the thesis.
But also, it's like that notion's a little bit weird to me because, okay, their lived experience, lightning bolts thousands of miles away, hit someone else. That's like a once in a lifetime kind of fluke. Whereas gravity, we all experience it. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't experience it. So how they can come to that rationale of like, well, that was Newton's lived experience with gravity. We have a different kind of law or science is weird to me.
Well, you see, it's people who don't understand the scientific method, and they don't understand that people can posit a theory of gravity, work out an equation on how gravity works on mass, and then test it again and again and again until there is no unverifiability of that hypothesis, and so it stands as a law of gravity. And because people don't understand the scientific method, they argue that Newton made this up in his head because he saw an apple fall.
I see.
And this is a great problem. It is the great problem that lived experience can trump the scientific method because the scientific method has been used over centuries to entrench white male heterosexual domination of society. And therefore, science must fall.
I mean, I just feel like it's leaps and bounds, but this is usually the way they argue as well. Like it feels like you play a mental gymnastics with these conversations that you have with some of these people, and even though that you can kind of get them into a corner, there's always something. And when like they'll say like when you get them into a corner, that's when they start saying, "Oh, you're just racist," or "You're a bigot," or "You're this," or "You're that." The insults start coming out, and I always say, the moment you're in a debate with one of these people, these woke types, and they start insulting you, you've won. Just leave the conversation, block the person, move on with your life. There's no, you'll feel better for it.
Well, that's true. But in a country like South Africa, we have to learn to have the hard conversations, and we have to learn to fight back.
Mm.
Because if you don't, you are surrendering more territory than you understand. In the United States and in other countries, there's enough pushback for you to know quite comfortably that if you block somebody or walk away, that there will be enough of an ecosystem and enough counter voices that will keep the debate alive. In our context, people get shut out so effectively and cancelled so deliberatively, and it has such a chilling effect on the rest of society that no one else dares to raise any similar point again, that it basically leaves the terrain for the autocrats and for those who wish to impose totalitarian views and methods on others. Yeah. And it completely closes down any liberal space for differing and for having rational conversations, rational adult conversations where people differ on the analysis of a situation.
Yeah.
And if we close that down, we cannot have a constitutional democracy in South Africa. And that is why it is so necessary. And that is why I wrote that book, because I was arguing that people need to be able to stand up. And I give a number of form conversations in the book to say when these kinds of issues come up and you are simply denounced as a Nazi by people who've never actually met a real life Nazi and would have no idea what a totalitarian regime is because they've only ever lived in a democratic country.
Yes.
When people come up with those kinds of cancelling statements, you have to be able to stand up against it, not walk away from it. And that's one of my key theses in the book.
Yeah, I do agree with that. If it's someone, it's a tough one, you know, because like social media, for example, has amplified a lot of this stuff, and there are, as you've mentioned in your book, you know, bots and sock puppets. Yeah. So it's, you can kind of see who they are because there's no reasoning, there's no like altering their view. They just keep on saying the same thing over and over and over. So those ones are the ones that I'm like, you know what, I'm going to block you because you're either being paid to do this or you're just never going to, like, you're an idiot. So but I do agree, like having conversations, the tough ones are needed. And that's why channels, well, I hope like mine or like Ramon, Ronaldo, Big Daddy Liberty, and so on, you know, are valuable to South Africa in the way of like, these are people that are willing to have these tough conversations, no matter how uncomfortable the viewer might feel. You never know. Something might, you know, a light bulb might go off and you might realize like, oh crap, maybe the ANC isn't the best government in South Africa.
Well, all the guys you've mentioned, Roman, Ronaldo, Big Daddy Liberty, they're all critical to South Africa. And they're people who are keeping voices alive and debates alive that otherwise would never be there. And where I do agree with you is that you need to let the schmoes, I nearly said Joe Schmoes, but then I realized who I was talking about.
That's all right.
You need to let them talk into a vacuum. I don't block people, but I just ignore them now. You know, being a liberal myself, I always believe that everybody is rational and fair, which is my first mistake. And I also then believe that everybody is deserving of an answer, which is also not true. So a lot of people, if they want to talk rubbish, can talk it into the ether, and I ignore them now. I wasn't easily able to ignore people in the past, but now I can so happily ignore them and never reply to them and just ignore them. And that is a much better punishment than engaging them. Just say you are so irrelevant that I'm not even going to bother replying to you.
That's a fair point. There's also an option on Twitter now where you can mute someone. So you don't really block them, but you don't get notified and you don't really see their stuff either. And they just kind of keep on engaging. And yeah,
they keep on engaging and they get the message that they're so irrelevant that they never get a response from you.
Yeah. But I mean, Twitter, you know, people put so much, okay, I wouldn't say people put so much faith in Twitter. I mean, Twitter is a very small, the amount of people that are, or users that are on Twitter in South Africa is very small. And again, a lot of them are fake accounts anyway. Social media itself, even Facebook, Instagram, you know, it's all, I don't think it resembles or reflects reality in any way, shape, or form. But you know, the woke crowd would have you believe that race is like the biggest problem in South Africa. We need to fix it. We need reform. We need all these kinds of things. But when you go out, you know, I don't know about you, Helen, but when I go to like my local Pick and Pay around the corner here, I'm seeing mixed races of different kinds, Black, Indian, colored, white, foreigners, mingling, talking, you know, no one's hating on each other. And I think that's something that people, if they get very caught up in social media, they need to have a look at reality outside of the window and realize that social media isn't reality.
Absolutely not. And as you say, 4% of South Africans are on Twitter. That's 4%. And I think about 2/3 of them are fake accounts or bot accounts or sock puppet accounts. So really, people who take Twitter seriously are crazy. And the media who follow Twitter, always say like a dog following a bitch in heat, are even more crazy. I mean, it's just bizarre. Now, I use Twitter because I believe in using all platforms of communication. I think that that's right, and I think we should be doing that. But the bottom line is you can't take it too seriously. Twitter is not the voters' roll. Twitter is not a random stratified sample of opinion. Twitter, if they are real people at all, are sitting there like keyboard warriors, being really, really brave behind a cloak of anonymity and saying all kinds of things that they would never have the gumption to say to someone if they were sitting opposite them. So it's all this fake courage that comes out with real cowards who would not ever dare to say that to anyone to their face. And so, I have complete contempt for people who become very brave under a cloak of anonymity.
Yep. No, I agree with you there. I want to quickly jump to a part in the book where you talk. Let me say it like this. The part of the book that I'm going to refer to now is basically you explaining basically what happened in the DA with your tweet about colonialism and all that, and how it exploded. Because I mean, you say like how many retweets it got and how many likes it got, and actually, like you said in the book, in the grander scheme of things, not that big of a deal. The numbers were actually quite small, but obviously it created this tornado within the political sphere, and all the great woke whatever kings and queens came out, and they had followers and whatever. I want to know something. So so what happened was you were in Singapore, you were on your way back, you were in Joburg, you tweeted, you were just having this very honest tweet thread, asking, questions. I found nothing wrong with the tweet, and now the wokes are probably gonna clip that and say, "Oh my word!" But so everything kind of went into like this crazy spiral of craziness while you were in the air, in the air. There's nothing you can do. You can't reply to tweets. You don't know what's going on. You land, and then, pardon my French, the shitstorm begins for you. I want to know, in that moment when you realized what had happened, the response, how did you feel? Did you get like a sinking feeling in your stomach? Were you just angry? How did you feel? What happened?
I think my overwhelming feeling was incomprehension. As you say, Joe, if you read through that thread, it's all basic, logical, common sense. It's nothing that almost every historian hasn't said before.
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela has said it far more forcibly. Even Chinua Achebe and other Africanist writers have said that before. So my greatest sense was there's something more going on here than I understand. And of course, it is that something more that I unpack in my book very carefully. Obviously, in politics, over time, you make enemies because you have to take tough decisions that not everybody likes. You have to go head to head with people, and they certainly don't like that. And the primary thing was that it was people in my own party for whom I'd drawn the line, with some of their pals, mainly from Rhodes University and a couple of other places, driven by Eusebius Mackiser primarily, the king of the Wokus Pocus, Wokerati. And they managed to pump it up initially. And then the DA seized it for a strategic reason by a new leader who was trying to prove to the world that the DA was no longer a white party. And the strategy was that if he could deliver Helen Zille's head on a platter, no one would ever accuse him of being a puppet again. Now, of course, he wasn't a puppet of mine, at all. He was no one's puppet. I was nowhere near the decision-making structures or processes of the DA at that stage. But it was a strategy that had been developed by a very woke consultant from the United States, who said, if you want to get Black support, what you have to do is decapitate Zille, and for whatever manufactured reason, doesn't matter. But if you do it, that will be the symbolic action that will change people's view. Now, number one, that was absurd, because no one had done more to diversify the DA's leadership than I had. No one. And it was also never going to change the narrative, because the only argument the ANC has ever had is race. They can't point to a single policies of theirs that's worked. They can't point to a single place where they govern properly. They can't point to a single success. The only thing they can mobilize around is race. And so for the DA ever to have thought that they could pacify that race mobilization on the part of the ANC by anything the DA did was purely delusional.
Yeah.
But that is what they did. That is what they tried to do. And it reverberated and rebounded very, very badly. Far from people believing that the DA was something else, they thought that we'd abandoned our principles, and we lost voters hand over fist. We didn't gain any.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you unpack that a lot in the book as well. I was quite surprised to see those numbers of that poll that was conducted, and how it turns out South Africans actually agreed with your tweet, which was obviously amazing. And for all the woke crowd that might be listening to this, it's true. So yeah, like, take it and shove it. But yeah, that's what they do. They just want to rile everybody up. There is one thing, if I may, I think I want people to understand something. This book is actually very easy to read. It's really interesting the way you've written it. I remember I read, when I first got the book, I read the first 2 pages, and then I looked at my wife and I was like, I'm hooked. I got to read more. You started off, you set the scene with the waitress that was horribly treated. I mean, when I was reading that, I was like, oh my word, I remember this story. And I thought that was a perfect way to start that book, and I've been reading it ever since. But there's one thing that I love, one moment that I love very much in this book, and it's not really what you say, but it's how almost like you've come out and you're like, you know what, the gloves are off. I'm going to be as honest as I possibly can in this book. You're not going to hide feelings. Not going to, that's kind of the tone almost. And if you don't mind, I want to read, and I'll put context to it, because if I just read the sentence, everyone's going to have a hernia. But let me just read this paragraph very quickly. And this is where I return to Ibrahim X. Kendi's logic, referred to in the previous chapter, and I quote, "You have Black people," he said, "you are in policymaking who are in policymaking positions and use those policymaking decisions to institute or defend policies that harm Black people. If those people were white, we would be calling them what they are, racists. If they're Black, they're no different. They're racists." And then you say, it's an end quote, and then you say, he's right. The ANC has turned out to be amongst the biggest racists ever to rule South Africa. Probably my favorite line in the entire book.
It's absolutely true.
Absolutely it is. I mean,
true. Their policies have been perfect. Their policies have done as much harm to Black South Africans as any previous regime in the country has.
Yeah. And the thing that I think that boggles my mind about South Africans is I used to, so let me also explain because we just met now. So I wasn't born in South Africa, but I have a South African mother, and we moved here in 2007. And I look at now 2021, and I look at just from 2007 to 2021, the regression that has happened, the downward spiral that has taken place. ESCOM, the list can go on and on. We all know what they are, and I haven't seen progress in terms of like economy, technology, any of that stuff. It's just been going down. And last 2 years ago, I started to venture into politics a little bit. Okay, what's going on? Why this is supposed to be a developing country, almost first world country. We had the FIFA World Cup here. Talks about the Olympics were going to come here. I don't know what happened about that. Probably we don't have the infrastructure. And now we have no electricity. I mean, at one point it was almost stage 8 electricity. It was crazy. And when I started to ask those questions, I started to realize like I felt that everything I had been told about the ANC was a lie. Because I was also in that boat of, ANC is going to bring the Rainbow Nation. They're fighting for righteousness and all that stuff. And there was a point where even I was like, BBE or which is triple B double E isn't necessarily a bad thing. But boy, when you start reading the policies and when you start really examining and researching, you got to ask yourself, how did we get here? And it's the ANC.
Exactly. And the big turning point for us came in 1997, very early on, as I said, with the policy of cadre deployment. And that was the genesis of state capture and all the corruption that we're seeing now. And my chapter 2 of the book is called The Great Betrayal, because it is about what we were promised and what was delivered. And the trouble is, it wasn't human error, it was a genuine betrayal. The ANC promised to lead us into an era of enlightenment, of rationality, of the rule of law, of evidence-based decision-making, of non-racialism, of constitutionalism. That's what they promised us. And they delivered to us the National Democratic Revolution, which is the exact opposite of all of that. It's got nothing to do with democratic or anything else. It's about the party controlling the state and the state controlling society, which is the Leninist concept of revolution. And so promising us enlightenment and democracy and all the values that are supposedly entrenched in our constitution, they gave us the exact opposite. And that is a massive betrayal. And that is what we need to be talking about much more openly.
Yes, I agree with that. On this channel, I'm constantly criticizing the ANC. And I mean, again, with South Africans, I don't understand why they're sleeping because, just this year when it was the ANC's birthday, Cyril Ramaphosa goes openly on national television and thanks the South African Communist Party for being such an integral part and writing out some of the policies of the ANC. I mean, and nobody flinches. Nobody goes like, hey, there's a problem here.
Well, at least he was being honest. I mean, the South African Communist Party did write their policies. I mean, the South African Communist Party adopted the National Democratic Revolution in 1962. And in 1969 at Morogoro, the ANC followed suit. So that's exactly what did happen. And the SACP has written all of the ANC's policies. But what the ANC did to pacify Western powers and to try and bring enough people along into the transition, they sold us a lie. And that's basically what happened.
Oh boy. Well, hopefully people will start waking up soon. I wanted to ask you, when I did a bit of research, I saw, I was looking at unemployment rates over time, like since 1994 till now. And something I noticed is when Thabo Mbeki was president, unemployment was like low, like people, like the economy was thriving, GDP was great. So what's your opinion on Thabo Mbeki?
Well, I have a much kinder view about Thabo Mbeki than many, many people in my own party. I always got on well with him. And I really do believe that he understood a market economy like most other colleagues of his in the ANC have never understood. And I do believe that although he was really misguided to mobilize around race in the way that he did, he was doing that in a sense to keep people behind his vision of a market-driven economy. So I do think that he understood the economy, and I do think that if he had another term, which he couldn't obviously have done because he had 2 terms in terms of our constitution, we wouldn't have had the massive plummet that we did under Jacob Zuma. There was a big turning point in 1997 when cadre deployment was accepted as a policy, and that was introduced by Nelson Mandela. Let's be quite frank about that. And that was a fatal moment. But the other really fatal moment was the election of Jacob Zuma in 2007.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you will remember that we had all those placards saying "Stop Zuma," and we were accused of being racists and all the other things that went along with it. But Jacob Zuma is not a constitutionalist. He's never understood the Constitution. He's never supported the Constitution. He is a rural traditionalist who only understands traditional systems, which are incompatible with constitutionalism and the rule of law. And he only understood power as a means of mobilizing personal resources and saw nothing wrong with that. And then introduced that into the whole body politic of South Africa. I think previously there had been corruption around the arms deal to benefit the ANC, but the extent of the personalized corruption that developed under Jacob Zuma could never have been foreseen. And his election was a catastrophic turning point for South Africa.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's yeah, and the guy is still basically giving the Constitution the middle finger, like the way he's been during the whole Zondo Commission and all that. Is just, yeah. But I don't know. Do you think he's gonna go to jail? I have my doubts.
Well, how old is Jacob Zuma? I think he's about 76 now.
Yeah.
So he's not getting any younger. And he'll give everybody the runaround. You see, the interesting thing is the Constitutional Court says he must appear before Zondo or face a contempt of court judgment. And you get arrested when you're in contempt of court, especially when you're in contempt of the Constitutional Court.
Yeah.
Now, the practicalities of going to arrest him in Nkandla is something that I still want to see. I mean, I walked to Nkandla once, and believe me, you go on a long and windy road for very many, many kilometers, and it is surrounded by poverty-stricken people who regard Jacob Zuma as their paramount chief, who was elected and deserves everything he got. And they see any threat to him as a threat to their identity and to their ethnic group. And the consequence is that they mobilize around him and defend him. Now, unless they go in there with a helicopter, they're not getting him out of there, believe me. They're going to have to go in there, land with a helicopter, do a kind of special forces operation to get him out there. It's not going to be easy. So I don't know how you're going to go and knock on his door and say, "Excuse me, Mr. Zuma, but I'm the sheriff and I've been dispatched here by the Constitutional Court." I'd still very much like to see how that plays itself out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And some breaking news today. I mean, Ace Magashule has apparently been some suspension papers or something, or he's been suspended. So having said that as well. Sorry?
Has the ANC suspended Ace Magashule, or has Ace Magashule suspended Cyril Ramaphosa? Because I've heard 2 totally different versions. And I've been busy all evening.
As far as I understand it, ANC has suspended Ace Magashule.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Apparently so, but there are some skeptical people. This could be another kind of distraction. Like, hey, look at us, ANC, we're doing something about our corruption, but nothing comes of it because he's still being paid his salary. I mean, what?
Well, that's how it goes. I was fascinated to see this because I had heard, but maybe it was just fake news as much of it is, that he'd served suspension papers on Cyril Ramaphosa, which would have been a smart move.
Maybe, yeah, but no, it's all over the news now. ENCA reported on it as well. It's confirmed that he's been suspended with pay, which is again ridiculous. The problem that I have with that, and Ramon Kabanek pointed it out, is the ANC. I think about 2 days ago, well, actually months ago, but recently again repeated that they don't have money for their employees. They can't pay salaries, but Ace gets his salary on suspension. Wow. And people
it's how it is.
still.
I mean, people have been suspended for years and years and years on full pay in the ANC. That's how it works. But as I say, I literally came off one meeting and into your podcast. So I'm sorry about that. And I only pick up what I see, but I have to filter the news very, very carefully.
Yeah. No, I understand.
What I get.
Well, what's your opinion on it? Seeing as we're here, I mean, like, what's your first reaction?
Well, I think it's a bold move, and I think it's an important move. But we'll see what comes from it. I don't think that Ace Magashule is going anywhere, and I think he's going to fight back very hard.
Yeah, I also think so. All right, so one of the other things I wanted to chat to you about is actually, this is actually going to lead on to my next question very well. I wanted to know, do you have access to the president? Like, can you, like, if you wanted to, I don't know, not necessarily friendly call him, but if you wanted to speak to the president, do you have easy access to him?
I used to when I was the leader of the Democratic Alliance, which was the official opposition. And I used to when I was Premier of the Western Cape. Okay. And we used to have an extended cabinet on a regular basis. And I used to attend the extended cabinet and the cabinet lechotla. And then I used to have very easy access to the president. But if I tried to get through to the president telephonically, I could get through, yes.
Okay.
Not anymore. I'm not in a political position anymore, but I could then.
Okay. Question. If you could speak to Cyril now, with the current climate in South Africa and all that stuff, what would you tell him?
Scrap cadre deployment and start merit-based appointments so that we can get things done and fixed.
You wouldn't like cuck him out a little bit?
Pardon?
You wouldn't cuck him out a little bit?
What you said, but I thought I better check. Look, I'd say get on with it already. What's the prosecuting authority doing? There's been so much evidence that's been tested, that's in the public domain. Why aren't more people being arrested and charged and suspended? That's another thing I would say to him.
Well, do you think he really cares about South Africa in that way?
I think he does, but I think he cares more about the ANC.
No, that I can agree with as well. Moving on to Musi Moyamani. Are you guys on talking terms?
I think if we see each other, we say hello and we're civil. Yeah, I mean, I don't go around bearing grudges against people. So I would be civil. I think he's got a lovely wife. I really do like Natalie. And I mean, I'm civil to people. I don't bear grudges.
Yeah, no, because that story again was absolutely like, I was riveted. I was like, I remember I got up to that point in the book and then I was like, okay, I'm going to go to bed now because this part I want to be able to focus. And I read it and I was blown away about the politics and the conniving here and there and strategy and all that stuff. Everybody trying to like maneuver certain things in place and coerce you, and but the way it happened, oh my word, like the way that day happened, yeah, I want people to go and read it. It's really interesting. And for a moment, I thought, you know what, this would make a good series. This would be like a mini series. This would be really good. I would love to see it. I don't know. I don't know who would play you, but yeah.
It would make House of Cards look tame.
Absolutely. No, but it's cool that, you know, like if you see Musi, like you know, do you feel that maybe he bears a grudge?
I have no idea. I think he was completely out of his depth.
Mm,
But what I do believe is that he was certainly not a victim.
mm,
Very few people in South Africa have had opportunities that he has given to him and paths opened for him as he had, and he's certainly not a victim. And to portray him as such is simply a reconfection of history.
yeah, no, that's actually very well said. Um, cool. I think the next question I have is, you know, in your book you talk a lot about, you know, first you lay out what wokeness is, very well written, by the way, and then you go into the solutions. Now, I haven't gotten to that part yet in the book. I'm almost there. Like I'm like 2 pages away from it. But I've heard what you've said on other interviews and stuff like that about the solutions, and you know, speaking about it is one, having conversations like this is another one. Um, but you know, the whole "don't let democracy die," you know, thing. I got to be honest with you, Helen. I'm worried. I know that wokeness, it's a very small amount of people that make noise about it. But the problem is when they make a noise about it, it's very noisy and a lot of people hear it. And like we said earlier, and you mentioned it, you know, it causes people to be quiet. It causes people to be cautious about what they say, what they do, how they feel, in fear of cancellation and being attacked publicly. The modern day version of public stone throwing. Um, and that's why I say, like, how really can we fix this? Is there
Well,
really
we
an
can,
answer to this?
yes, there is. It might take a long time, and we might not be able to take a shortcut through history. But I do believe that there is such a thing as rationality and reality. And I think it makes a difference to get closer to it. And I think over time, getting closer to it has real life consequences. And I do believe that we can uphold the methods and the processes and the dialectic and the debate that gets us closer to the truth. And there's been nothing in the history of human beings that has beaten those methodologies yet. And although human beings can take tremendous wrong routes through history, and that history has a down escalator and an up escalator, I do believe that reason, rationality, decency matter, and that there is a force for good in the universe. And it takes a lot of work to try and bend that long arc in the right direction, but ultimately, I think it does happen.
Would you say that maybe South Africa might have lost the battle if EWC is officially passed?
We've never lost the battle. I mean, we can take a lot of steps backwards, and we're currently on a down escalator in history. We were on a wonderful up escalator throughout the 1990s, and the escalator kind of stopped during the early 2000s. Now we're on the down escalator, but we've turned around down escalators before. And there's no reason why we shouldn't do it again if enough people realize what's going on, mobilize, and refuse to keep quiet about it. And
Mm,
that's what we have to do.
mm. Yeah, I definitely agree about the keep quiet. And that's again, but see, this is where I've seen and spoken to a lot of my friends and other South Africans. You know, there's two big problems to fight the ANC, just on a ground level. Okay, people have lost faith in the government. Like when I moved here, in 2007, everyone was always asking me, like, first question was, where are you from? Second, when they heard where I was from, which was from the States, they were like, why are you here? Our government is crap. That's literally every time I said that. And a lot of people, the first thing they do is they make fun of the government. They don't care about the government. A lot of South Africans, I feel, are in that mindset of, I just want to go to work. I want to provide for my family. I want to put food on the table. I don't give a damn what the ANC are doing, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like that is a battle on its own that someone needs to fight. One of the parties need to fight. Because I don't feel the DA is fighting that. I don't feel any party is fighting that. Making South Africans wake up to the issues that are in South Africa and saying, hey, guys, it's more than corruption. It's more than this, it's more than that, it's more than this. Like we're going into, if not already halfway there, into another Zimbabwe situation. And that job that you are so focused on that you want to get to every day won't be there in a few months' time.
Well, we certainly try to do that as much as we can in the DA. But the bottom line is, and this is the great and deep irony of the situation, that the more people lose their jobs because of a collapsing economy, and the more people become dependent on the state, the more they believe that they have to thank the ANC for giving them some kind of lifeline through a social grant. And so the irony is that the more impoverished people become and the less chance they have of getting or keeping a job because of the collapse of the economy, which is the result of ANC policies, the more dependent and beholden they think they are to the ANC. This is the tragic irony. And so I used to believe that when people saw the economic devastation, they would immediately then vote against the ANC. The opposite is true. And the ANC often spread completely false rumors that if the DA were to come to power, we would scrap social grants, which of course we would not do. But that is what they say in order to make people believe that the grant comes from the ANC, not from the taxpayer. And it's these kinds of things that keep people desperately poor, more and more beholden to a corrupt and debilitating government.
I think, yeah, that makes sense. But then what do you say to the 10 million people, I think it was 10 million people, I could be wrong, in the last election that were registered to vote but didn't?
You know what I say? That in a democracy, voters get the government they either voted for or didn't vote for, which is the government they deserve. If people don't want to vote, they must understand that they will get the government that other people voted for. And if they don't like it, too bad, they forfeited their chance.
Yeah, fair point as well. I definitely am going to vote the coming elections. And I've said this many times on this channel. I'm in between three parties. And I still haven't decided which one gets my vote. But one thing is for sure, I will 100% vote, and it will not be for the ANC or the EFF. So very quickly, opinion on the EFF.
Well, the EFF is the polar opposite to the DA. The EFF stands for something, which you can't say for the ANC. You don't know what it stands for. The EFF stands for racial nationalism. It is against constitutionalism and the rule of law. It stands for the party controlling the state and the state controlling society. And it stands for so-called democratic centralism, which has nothing to do with being democratic and everything to do with concentrating power in a very few hands at the apex of the political pyramid. Mm-hmm. So the EFF stands for something, and it stands for the exact opposite that the DA stands for. Where they stand for racial nationalism, we stand for non-racialism. Where they stand for the control of the party over the state and the state over society, we stand for constitutionalism and the rule of law and a culture of accountability. So we are the dead opposite. And that's what I think of the EFF. I think they're in an ever-present danger in South Africa. And if they ever came to power, it would be a very short route to the worst of Zimbabwe.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think some of my followers would be upset with me if I didn't bring up this topic. You mentioned federalism. Is DA really a federalist party? Is that really something you guys, if you guys came into power tomorrow, that's what you would try and implement as soon as possible? Is that really?
Absolutely. I'm a very,
Okay.
very passionate federalist, and I believe in decentralization of power, and I believe in decentralizing functions and power to the lowest effective level. Yes.
Okay. So would you say that you are a liberal?
Yes, absolutely, I am.
Okay. So you believe in obviously people's rights for freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom, all that stuff.
I believe in
Basically,
individual freedom. Yes.
yes, individual freedom. Do you believe in sovereignty of the individual?
Yes.
Okay.
Under the rule of law. Yes.
Under the rule of law, yeah. So there is a big debate at the moment about Cape independence or Western Cape independence. And in an interview, well, most of the interviews that I've asked you about this, you're not very keen on it. And I understand. I've also interviewed Natasha Matsone. She gave me the same spiel. It's not South African. It's this, it's that. I really, to some extent, understand where that comes from. However, if you were in power now, would you grant Western Cape independence?
If we were in power now and people wanted Western Cape independence, then you would very carefully look at the constitutional mechanism to achieve it. It's a democratic process. There's a clause in the Constitution that enables that to happen if certain conditions are met. The trouble is those conditions will never be met while the ANC is the central government. So it makes sense, if you want Western Cape independence, to vote the ANC out of office first, because that's a critical component of that. Now, what we would do is decentralize power dramatically. We would decentralize public transport, for example, to the metros, and we would put the budget behind it to make it happen. Because you must remember that federal taxes have to fund all of these things as well. We would decentralize education. We would crucially decentralize the police to any sphere of government that had the capacity to run the police. Now, you obviously can't decentralize powers to a place that has absolutely zero capacity. And I can think of some provinces and some local authorities that don't have that capacity. But what one would want to do as a federalist party is to make sure that you decentralize real powers to the lowest effective level, where people could actually run them properly. And that at federal level, you're dealing with things like a federal budget, you're dealing with things like the army, you're dealing with things like international relations, home affairs, all of those sorts of things. But where actual service delivery functions are concerned, they should be decentralized where the capacity exists to deal with them, and it certainly exists in the Western Cape.
Yeah, it's a good answer. You made a fair point. If I don't know. I think, like you mentioned in your book, like because of the situation that South Africa's in and people being upset with the ANC and then a bit of a fumble from the DA, all these other groups started to form, one of them being the Cape Independence Movement, and just people being upset with the current government that they're in and trying to find solutions to get out of it. And I think you have a very valid point when you say, you won't get it under ANC, but you might get it under DA. If it's something, and that's something I would actually like to know from some of these Western Cape independence supporters, is if the DA did come into power, would you still want Cape independence?
Well, they probably wouldn't, because you see, there are lots of disadvantages to having Western Cape independence. First of all, how are you going to protect your borders? They're going to be some of the longest borders ever on this continent, if you look at the borders of the Western Cape currently. And you're going to have to spend a lot of effort and a lot of energy and a lot of money doing that. Where are you going to get a tax base from, with the bulk of the economy in Gauteng still? What are you going to do to get trade going when the first thing that the rest of the country is going to do is put excise duty onto all of your exports? I mean, there are lots of things to think about. very practical things to think about. So I would imagine that if the DA was running the country and running it properly, with fit-for-purpose people in the right places, there wouldn't be a need for that, and people would much prefer not to be spending millions protecting a border, but actually getting on with improving fundamental services like education, transport, policing, health, etc.
Fair points. Fair points. I'm not someone in the Western Cape movement, so I don't have the answers to those.
But one thing we support them on very fully is the right to hold a referendum. And currently, the Premier does have the theoretical power to call a referendum, but only in terms of national legislation, which does not exist. And so we're all in favor of having that national legislation tabled so that referenda can be held by provinces.
Well, there you go. And that's fair. That is fair. That is very fair. It's more than the ANC would ever do, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, all right. So we're almost out of time, and I know that you've had a very long day, and so once again, I want to thank you. I haven't been
able to read about Ace Magashule. That's how long my day.
Hey, you're not missing out on much. Someone got suspended. He's still getting paid. He won't go to jail. That is pretty much it.
That's the summary.
Yeah. I really want to say, like, thank you, Helen, for coming on to my show. It really means a lot to me for you to give me an hour of your time, of your busy day. And I think your book, I really, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the show. I've been a victim to wokeness and this cancel culture crap. And when you released this book, I was like, I have to read this. I just have to. And I'm so glad I did, because anybody that's going through a tough time with dealing with what's happening in the world today and this cultural war that we're having, read the book, because there's some very good, insightful information that Helen will definitely help you process and give you basically a fighting chance, and give South Africa, hopefully, a fighting chance against what is currently happening, this wokeness that is overtaking South Africa. Helen, is there anything you want to say in closing?
Nothing, Joe. It was just a pleasure to be with you. I'm really sorry I kept you waiting at the beginning. Thanks for being so generous about it, and for taking the responsibility onto the technological problem. I just have to inform your listeners that it was me. I just come out of another very difficult meeting, and I came straight onto to Joe's show. So thank you very much, Joe, and it's been a great pleasure being with you.
Thanks again, Helen. I'm going to do a bit of a sign off now. You can stay on, but if you have to go, I know you're probably hungry as well. If you have to go, I'll email you or give you a proper goodbye later. But you can stay backstage and we can say goodbye. It's up to you.
Okay. I'll stay backstage. Cool. Wait.
Awesome. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Helen Zille. Remember, go and get her book. Link is in the description at the moment right now under this video. Go get it. Amazon, Take-A-Lot, any bookstore. It's available. Go get it. It's going to help you a lot to navigate the current, I don't know, epidemic, whatever you want to call it, that is wokeness, the woke cult. It's a great book. It's easy read, and it's not long. It's only 200 pages. I've just had a very busy week as well, so I haven't been able to read it completely, but it is an awesome book, so please go check it out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. You guys have been amazing. Don't forget to go check out rebelstoreza.com. That's where you can get the shirt. Please go check it out. I'm gonna make this very quick. Share this far and wide if anybody's interested to know more about the book and more about Helen Zille. So please, and I hope she'll join me again. I've got a lot more questions about her career, but I really wanted to focus on the book tonight. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for tuning in. You guys have been amazing. I will be back tomorrow evening interviewing another lady about personal safety and how she's empowering women to fight back, because at the moment, SAPS, their system isn't really working. It's been off. DNA backlog. It's a mess. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about how women can take some defense and not necessarily take law into their own hands, but she's going to give them help to defend themselves when they're in danger and not always have to rely on the cops. So tune into that tomorrow evening. If I don't see you then, stay safe, be kind to one another, and I'll see you at the next one. Cheers, guys.